Snake. That's the end.
Oh, the square eggs. Um, thank you, Sherry. All right, next we have Beverly. And if she could unmute. From Beverly's from New York. She's a retired third grade teacher. And she coined the word STEM for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in 1985. She started that valued program and was recognized for this really hard work as many teachers began using her program. It was featured on an NBC News program called Things That Work. And we know a teacher is never retired. And she is now telling over 40 stories using her skills to motivate others and teach us to care about our world, the people, animals, and opportunities that are there for us. Her story today is an environmental story called The Fisherman and the Sea. Beverly.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me correct? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It's a true story. In 1970, I was a freshman in college in Long Island at a college called Southampton at Long Island University. This college was all excited. We were going to celebrate the very first Earth Day in the world. And people from all over the world was going to have people talk, and they were going to have demonstrations. And we didn't know what was going to happen, but we were excited. Now, in class, my professor said, I want each of you to go out, and the Southampton College was known for marine science, and let us know if there's an environmental problem you can find to talk about it. I was in a marine science. I was just in the class because I had to take it. And I went up to the teacher and I said, I don't have a story. And she said, well, tell me about yourself. And I said, well, I'm hoping to be an elementary teacher someday. Ah, really? Ah, and she goes, I have a friend. And she took her pocketbook, took out her car keys, and said, I want you tomorrow morning to drive to my friend's place. Go to the very end of Long Island until the highway stops. And there you're going to see a big old wooden sign, and it's going to say Montauk Point. That's the last point on Long Island before the ocean begins and the island ends. Well, my friend will tell you a story, and I want you to tell his story this Saturday for Earth Day. Okay, so I'm driving along and it's starting to get foggy and misty. It's a cold spring day. And the windshield wipers are going, and it's a strange car. And I'm young and I've never driven anybody's car before. My parents had said, don't ever do that because of insurance reasons, but I wasn't going to tell my parents. And I'm driving and driving, I'm getting nervous. And all of a sudden the road ends and there's the sign. Well, I get out and close the car door, and I was told, go down the dock and you will see an old hut. That's where my friend lives. Well, some of the boards were missing on the dock. I had to make sure I looked down so my foot wouldn't go in and get wet from the ocean. About halfway down the dock, I saw the little hut, the pipe coming out of the top of the roof with some black smoke. My stomach got a little hurt, upset. I don't know. I have a bad feeling about this. Should I say I couldn't find it? But I had made a promise. I got to the door and I figured maybe if I knocked real softly, they wouldn't hear inside and I could say I couldn't find it. But I knocked twice and an old man swings open the door. He had a floppy hat and wrinkled, weathered face. like he had been out all his life outside in the sun and the wind. He had a long gray beard and suspenders, holding up a flannel shirt and his pants, which were floppy, and he smelled fishy like a fisherman. He says, "Come in, my dear. I've been waiting for you all morning." Oh, I looked behind him. There was a little table for two, old wooden and kind of dirty. And above him was a single light bulb coming down on a wire chain. And next to it was a strip of paper. And it was holding all these dead flies and insects that was around the hut that he had had and caught them. The tape had caught them. I quickly looked around. There was the potbelly stove where the smoke was coming from, a little sink and some shelves with food and other utensils. And there was a single bed. And on the wall were some frames like pictures, but I couldn't really see them. He says, "Come in, my dear, and sit down." And he gives me an old mug that's a little chipped. And since I was just cold, I kind of held my hands around it to warm up, but I didn't want to drink any tea that he gave me. "Come, my dear, I have a story to tell you." So he sits down and I sit down and I got my pad out. He goes, "No, I want you to just listen. You'll get more out of it if you really listen to my story." He goes, "When I was a young boy," and he leans real forward, invading my space a little, so I kind of leaned a little back. "I was a boy in Montauk Point here, and I wasn't much of a student. I really liked talking to the fishermen and hearing their stories and helping learn the knots and how to take care of the boat, because they would always sail from Montauk Point over to Europe, and where they would fish, make their money, and then come back and give the money to their families to survive. Well, they said to me, 'You're too young to go with us,' when I kept asking. 'We'll know when the time is ready.' And sure enough, he said, after a couple of years, when I knew everything I thought I knew, that I could do the job, they said, 'Son, would you like to come with us?' Well, I had already been skipping a lot of school just to be with them. And I knew my mother would say no. So I lied and I told them, 'My mom gave me permission. I'm 16 now.' He was only 15, he said. And he said, 'I got permission to go with you.' And he goes, 'Are you sure? Because we're going to leave tomorrow morning.' 'I am sure.' And that was the beginning of my life as a career as a fisherman. We would sail the oceans. They were sparkling clear with no pollution, no garbage, nothing. You could see the whales sometimes come up and the dolphins. And I learned so much from the fishermen and heard their stories at night of their adventures that they had had. And then we'd get to Europe. Now, they told me that their fathers, way back, knew where the fisheries were, where thousands of fish always were. And they made sure they didn't overfish, but took what they knew they could sell. And they went from port to Ireland, to England, to Germany, to France, to Spain. And at the ports, they would maybe stay a few days and tour around the land. He got to see all different places of Europe and met all different people. He loved it. But as the years went by, there was a problem. He said it was just heart-wrenching. They started seeing pollution, like nets that animals were getting stuck in. Some were dead already and some were stuck, and they would try sometimes to get them unstuck, but there was just too many of the nets and animals stuck. And when they got to the fisheries got less and less. People were overfishing. Eventually, the pollution got so bad. Oh, the stink, you could even smell it before you saw it. And the fisheries, a lot of them were disappearing. And even the people in the ports of Europe were concerned because there was less and less fish to buy. He was mad, the fisherman. What can we do about it? So I had a plan. Well, I decided to try to find the mayor of the towns or the governor or even the royal people, the kings and queens and princesses, whoever would listen to me. I went to universities and I would talk. I would go to the pubs and we'd get drunk, but I would talk to all of them. And so what can we do to solve this problem? And sometimes we had some good plans to educate the people about not overfishing. And we had people talk about what we could do about the pollution and maybe start cleaning some of it up, or tell people not to keep throwing things in the ocean. Look, I have something to show you. And I said to myself, look where, it's a little square little hut. And we stand up and he takes me over to the potbelly stove. He said, come, you see this? This is the royal people from the Queen of England. And you see them all together? They gave me an award for trying to clean up the oceans and save the fisheries. And I looked close and went, he's not lying. It's a real picture. And then he took me on a tour around the hut. All the pictures and frames I had seen were all the different ports and people he met throughout Europe. He said, see, all these people gave me awards. I was very well known in Europe. Wow. Come, my dear. I have a question to ask you before you leave, because I want you to tell the story on the first Earth Day I hear you're having at the college. And we sat down, and now my ears were really listening. I was really interested in this person. He had a very interesting life. And when he was talking about, I was, wow, this is a problem I could agree with. He said, my dear, I asked your teacher to do something very special for me. I asked her to find her a teacher that I know can carry on my legacy. And he kept taking his beard and going like that. And he leans forward. I'm not going to be alive much longer. I need someone to carry out my legacy and let people know of the pollution that needs to be solved and cleaned up in the oceans and not overfishing the fisheries of the world. Teachers make the best tellers. I want you to promise me that you will tell your students, their parents, your community, and get the word out to the world. Things do spread about this problem. I've worked hard all these years and I'm an old man. You're just starting your career. I need a promise that you will carry this out for me. I was only 19 years old. I was going to make a promise for a lifetime of teaching when I only thought I was going to be a teacher. And I sat there and it was silence. I said to myself, it's not going to hurt to say I promised. And hopefully maybe I would do something for him later in my classes. So I said, okay, I promise. No, he said, you are not serious. You're just saying that to make me happy. I want a real promise that you are going to commit for every year you teach to make sure the oceans and the fisheries are known to be polluted and needs help. Oh my goodness, I said to myself, this man's serious. And I sat. It seemed like an eternity. And I thought, well, I do believe in his cause. It would make a nice unit. And I could maybe also make a difference like he made in Europe. So finally, I leaned forward to him and we were almost nose to nose. And I said, okay, I promise you have my word. I'm so relieved because I think I really believe you now. He said, my dear, I want you to tell my story and don't ever forget it. So when you become a teacher, you will do this for me. The fog's coming in and it's starting to rain and it's very cold. I think you better get going and take the car back to your teacher she'll probably tell me how well you did on Saturday. Well, I got up, almost hit my head on the light bulb. It was still swinging. He opened the door and the wind hit us. And I left and I turned, and I gave him a hug and I said, "You smell fishy." And he says, "Everyone tells me that." And we laughed. And then he had a habit of going like this with his beard. And I started walking down the dock and I turned around and he was watching me and he gave me 2 thumbs up. And I gave him 2 thumbs back. I made it back to Southampton, and that Saturday, I told the story of the fisherman and the sea. And 3 years later, I graduated as an elementary teacher and got a job in Troy. I taught there for 35 and a half years on the elementary level. And every year, when the Earth Day month came along, which was always in April, I did a whole unit on the oceans and the pollutions and the fisheries. And we would write books and make a play and have all the classes come in. We would call the mayor and the politicians, and we had a big production of what we had learned. We went over to the local college and did a production. We did something at the mayor's once, and in the New York State Museum was only 15 minutes down the road. And we put on sometimes exhibits in the major New York City Museum that represented all of New York State. We carried it out and passed the messages along so people knew of the problems. Now, today, I need your help. Not only did I carry out the legacy of the old fishermen in the sea, I need my legacy carried out of the pollution that's still happening and the lack of fisheries because of overfishing. So I'm asking all of you to please try to spread this word. And one other thing I'd like to add. Last year, a fleet of boats for people who heard about this problem, engineers built them. And they had big holes. And there was this one area of the ocean that was so horribly polluted. And they filled the holes with all this pollution. And they took it to a place off land where they built a factory. The factory separated what could be recycled, and they recycled the dirty pollution that they sucked up in the oceans and got rid of the garbage properly that they could not use. And it was so successful. A few more fleets were built, and now they're going out into different parts of the ocean to collect that garbage, to unpollute and make way for fisheries to be healthy, to be able to be fished and fed to the people of the world. So I hope you will think twice the next time you throw something out near the ocean or near the beaches. And you will remember the fisherman in the sea who desperately wanted his legacy to be continued so the whole world would know we need to save that part of the earth for our future children. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Very nice. And we are in April, right?
Yes, it's always April. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Back to Marion.
Thank you to Beverly. And if you have some ideas already of what you're going to do to help the oceans, or maybe something you're already doing, I went out on Clean Up the Beach Day and did some work, and maybe somebody else did that, or some other even pollution up at the lake right near me. But I want to take a minute that people can unmute themselves and give a response to Beverly's story, Cherry's story, and Marion's story. Take just a couple minutes to give any feedback for us, and then we're going to take a little short break after that and continue for our second part of our program. So unmute yourselves if you have something to say. Cherry.
I wanted to tell Beverly there was a couple of lines in your story that I just thought were wonderful. You were talking about this young girl, and she went up to the door and she knocked, and she hoped nobody would answer. I just, it just hit me. Of course, she would do that. And then she's thinking, should I promise? Should I promise? Sure, what the husband is going to do? So she tells him, I promise, and he doesn't accept that. It just seemed so human nature, both of those things. Him not accepting her off the cuff promise, and her hoping he didn't answer the door. So I thought it was a wonderful story. One of the things that we are doing in our area, we have Lake Tahoe, which is one of the clearest lakes in the world.
Mm,
And one of our local distilleries is paying scuba divers to go down and pick up the trash that you can see from on top of
mhm.
to pull it out. So I thought that what a great commercial company is doing to help clean up our Lake Tahoe.
Thank you. Some more comments?
Marion,
Yes, Diamond.
I love both of your stories, and I noticed that both of them came off as very polished in your delivery and very smooth flowing. And I really appreciated the amount of animation that you put into the stories, because it not only held my interest, but it made them very enjoyable. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Diamond.
This is Karen. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Karen.
Hi. I just wanted to comment about some of the audio response that I was getting. You were cutting out, Marion, several times. I don't know if you're moving around or if you're moving your mic around, but that's the comment I have. Some of you were
Okay.
fading in and out.
Thank you. Because I need to know that, because I can't tell on my end. Thank you. Appreciate that very much. We'll work on that.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. And Karen, do you have some comments on Beverly's story? Because you too are an environmentalist. I saw her working at the Historical Society. Karen.
No, I had nothing to love the story.
What?
And you told it very well because you took your time. I enjoyed the pace of it.
Yeah, for Beverly's story. Yes, that was great. Good pacing.
And when I started STEM, I would go to, I was the keynote speakers a lot at engineering societies, and I was keynoted with David Ballard about the oceans and the Titanic. I have a story later I could tell about that. But I talked to them about it and I said, what do you think you could do? And they got a committee in the New York State Engineering Society at that time about pollution of the oceans and the engineering of it. And I think the idea of getting the ships kind of started with the engineers thinking of what they could build to help, unpollute the oceans. And I got the engineering of the Year Award from New York State Engineering Society. I was the only non-engineer person to have gotten that award because I was pushing them to try to figure out how to unpollute the oceans.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pushing.
Sometimes we gotta. All right, we're going to pause our recording because we're going to take a few minutes